Seven Keys to Unlock Autism offers a personal toolkit to build relationships with students of all abilities, especially those with autism.
In this DVD, you'll get a glimpse of the keys in action with master teachers who are creating miracles in their classroom right now.
Now, these 7 keys are already within you, so you can start practicing them today.
Autism, I think at its core, is a huge sensory motor dysregulation. And a lot of kids, if you looked at them and said, gee, if we could just normalize their sensory motor system, I don't know that we would be here talking about a lot of these other issues.
So these challenges can include everything from responses to the sensory environment, noises being much too loud, touch being, in some cases, just aversive for some individuals. And of course, every individual is an individual. And so we really look at all of the aspects that make people less available for learning and engaging.
Within our DIR model, as you know, the whole notion is profiling the individual child and tailoring the approach to the child. The D is the developmental levels, the I are the individual processing differences, auditory, visual, spatial, sensory, modulation, etc., motor planning, and the R are the learning relationships, including educational relationships.
When I train teachers, I always start off with the learning pyramid. The learning pyramid starts off with the developmental presets, pre-skills at the bottom. And I talk to teachers about what these presets are, like crossing the midline, being able to integrate body parts, sensory profile, how are their senses? Are they overstimulated, understimulated?
If you're dysregulated, overwhelmed, you're prone to be at the mercy of your fight-flight reactions, right? Shut down, withdraw, get impulsive, get distracted, get aimless. We see this all the time with our children with special needs, whose sensory systems are very fine-tuned, either being underreactive, overreactive, or sensory craving, and so they frequently are overwhelmed or underwhelmed into these more basic, early reactions, which doesn't allow you to think. You get locked into fixed perceptual motor patterns.
Many of us have a sensitivity to fluorescent lights. We may perceive fluorescent lights the way most people perceive a strobe light. Now, a strobe light can be fun on Halloween and other holidays, but it can do a real number on your concentration at work and your productivity in school.
So the thing that really informs us to how to approach the child is figuring out, again, how they learn about their world. So what I mean by this is this a child who is overly sensitive to his environment? Is this a child whom just any kind of sound outside in the hallway is going to really increase his anxiety and send him up a tree? Or is this a child who you could light a firecracker behind and he would never move?
Well, part of what we have to deal with in terms of our sensory differences is that a lot of the information coming to our senses tends to be distorted. So as a result, we have to depend on unreliable information from the environment.
Children with autism live in a world that doesn't always make sense to them. And if you were in a world that didn't make sense to you, how could you even be calm? Of course you would be driving natural anxiety. Anxiety is part and parcel of having an autism spectrum disorder.
Emotional regulation has to do with what we refer to as being available for learning and engaging with others. And we do know that part of the disability, if you will, of autism is that there are many challenges in terms of being available. Now, these challenges are challenges we all face, but unfortunately, due to the neurology underlying autism, many people with autism are more vulnerable to these challenges.
Another aspect of our sensory system is that we often have difficulty with foreground and background. And what that means is that sounds that most of us ignore, we receive full strength. So we might be able to compare that to watching TV with all of the stations on at once instead of just one.
I talked to a teacher last night that said I have a student that is avoiding learning and has on a hood and has on earphones and is texting and has his head down. And I said to the teacher, I said, out of the top of my mind, I could think auditory figure ground, the background noise may be hard for the student, auditory memory, the student can't hold everything that's been happening in the classroom at the same time. And sometimes when a student does that, they're trying to focus. They're trying to focus themselves. They'll put their hood on and they're really trying to focus on what you're doing instead of the opposite, trying to shut you out.
I may be able to tell a typical child, raise your arms, and he'll raise his arms. I might tell a child with autism, raise your arms, and nothing happens. Not because they don't understand that you're supposed to raise your arms, but because their intent is not often hooked up to their motor output. So they are not able to raise their hands.
Another aspect of how we now look at behavior in a different way is that a lot of so-called autistic behaviors that were called autistic behaviors in the past, such as jumping and flapping and rocking and looking at fingers or whatever it might be, we understand now in many cases these are self-calming, self-regulatory behaviors, and that we have to respect the function that they serve. That doesn't necessarily mean it's okay all the time for a child to do that or a person to do that if it's not effective for them or if it's stigmatizing. But if we respect the purpose or the function of the behavior, then we can help a person acquire other ways to serve that same function.
If I know I'm being disruptive to class by being too agitated, I say to the teacher, "Do you mind if I take a walk? Do you mind if I step outside? That way I won't be disruptive to the class."
I just don't believe children are non-compliant without a reason. I don't believe they aren't obeying, and usually the reason they aren't is because they don't have a say in what's going on. I use behavior as a means of communication.
What we try to do is understand what are the risks to an individual's emotional regulation. We believe that we all strive very naturally in life to be well regulated emotionally, so we can be most available for learning and engaging. So if we accept the fact that that's one of the great challenges faced by people with autism, we need to put the proper supports in place, as well as help people with autism develop the coping skills. Because the world is a noisy, loud, busy, fast, crazy place sometimes.
It's amazing that kids go through school and struggle. They're my biggest heroes. They show up every day no matter what. And they don't know why they're struggling. And so part of what I do is I teach the students what it is that they're struggling with and how to communicate that to other instructors and how to compensate for it themselves in their learning. And that's the foundation of everything that we learn. Yeah. What is it that I need to know? How do I need to learn? And how can I tell people and advocate for myself in my learning?
We have to look at strengths to get at areas of challenge, because we often can find those strengths. And I think it's important to understand that they may not be so obvious first, but just looking at what a child is interested in, what do they spend the most time with. Then the burden comes back on us to be creative in using those interests and strengths to help that child or that individual learn what they need to learn to be out there in activities in everyday life, to be able to be with their friends in a wide variety of situations.
You okay?
Yeah.
Do you have a good day today?
Mm-hmm.
What's your journal about?
About my spring break,
What'd you do?
play football.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Are you going to play for the school this year? Did you say no?
No.
What happened? I thought you really, really cared about football.
I'm not playing this year. I don't have a reason.
You don't have a reason? Well, if I'm going to put my 5 cents in, I think that it's good for you to play football for the school. You get to know people, you get to be part of a group, and those things were really good for you before. I'm thinking that you probably shouldn't give up quite yet.
If I can find what motivates them, where they see themselves in 5 years, or what's really important to them, then why should I learn how to figure out the verbs and the predicates in this sentence, or why should I know my multiplication facts? Then if I can tie learning in to what their strength is, then it becomes valuable.
But we need to get better at helping teachers, helping parents, helping ourselves understand how can we use strengths to enhance quality of life for many kids.
Well, do you want your students to live in the world of reality, or do you want them to live in the self-absorbed, withdrawn world of make-believe or idiosyncratic behaviors? No, they have to appreciate reality because they can't have judgment. They can't think without appreciating reality. That's the first step in thinking. Okay, well, the representative of reality is some human relationship outside the self.
So for the child who seems to be disconnected from the class, an important thing to do would be to see how is the child spending most of their time? What is their interest?
So if a child is really interested in weather, some people within autism language might say, well, he's obsessed with weather. However, another way to look at it is he has a deep interest in weather.
If they're interested in airplanes, is there a way to bring airplanes into the conversation, whether it's math, when you're trying to figure out how long it takes an airplane to get from one place to another, or it could be geography, where do planes fly, and when a plane lands in India, what are the differences in culture in India than in the United States? So you can find a way to work airplanes into every single subject.
Sometimes it takes one teacher in a classroom who could think out of the box, be a bit more creative, even use the arts to get at goals in academics or socialization or in other areas.
I had a student, a girl, that she drew anime characters all the time and seemed to be much more focused on her drawing than listening to what the teaching was happening in the classroom. She could use her anime drawings to do a cartoon, and we could take that into literature. And so she could actually, instead of writing her stories, her essays, in just a normal paragraph format, she could do it in a cartoon format with her anime subjects.
My teacher knew I was in the music, so she let me wrap one of wrap a few of my assignments.
He was this amazing artist. How about when we do the sketching? We read a story and we're trying to understand it, and you need to sketch what happened. And what do you struggle with?
Like what's really happening.
Understanding the story.
Yeah.
So definitely sketching would definitely help you.
A lot of teachers are just set in their ways, and they aren't open to other people's learning styles. I have a very different learning style than most individuals. So when I went into a classroom, I didn't necessarily get the instruction I needed to succeed.
Because you and we've established a relationship over the years. When I first met you, what do you think you were like?
I knew I didn't like school. I didn't want to be here. When I came and I was just sitting in class, you pushed me to work, and then you took me to the side and explained to me how to break it down and do my syllables and all that. So
I really wanted you to get a high school diploma. It's my thing. And I could not figure out what it was that was standing in between. So we talked about, since that's a struggle for you, planning things out. So that's homework, projects. And if that's a struggle, then we talked about little steps at school to plan things out. I think that's really going to help you in college or cosmetology school. Is that still the deal, cosmetology school?
yeah.
She's going to get the diploma. Right?
I remember in about third grade, a teacher telling me that I'd never learn how to do math. And this was at the same time that I had this big stack of astronomy books on my desk. Somehow I figured out just enough math to teach statistics at the university level. The good news is that today an educator would have noticed such a special interest and would hopefully work that interest into the curriculum to teach me whatever needed to be taught.
It's very rare to find a teacher who is able to accommodate all the different learning styles and who could see someone like me, see my strengths and work with them and work with me in a way that doesn't focus on what I'm doing wrong, but focuses on what I can do right.
The biggest breakthrough that changed my career was a student who would not talk to me. Every time that I would talk to her, her head would hit the desk, like that movie Breakfast Club, and I was told by her mom to just accept her the way she is, this is the way it is, and it just pained me. And when I start learning about autism and about development, I came back and I tried it on her.
Oh, hop, hop, hop. Oh, there you go, there you go, there you go. Oh.
I started with engagement. I found out what she liked. She liked fashion magazines and gossip magazines. And every day, I started non-verbally first. When the kids would walk into class, I would fan out these gossip fashion magazines on my desk because I knew she would look. And she'd walk by every day. And then after a while, I would say, do you have your book for silent reading? And I'd hold up my gossip magazine, which I totally do not read. And then next, I initiated conversation. You know, did you know Usher broke up with his girlfriend? And then we started the relationship. And what happened is that I found out that this child had a lot of challenges that I didn't know about, that I couldn't see. And I found out about her body was, you know, challenged, and her trunk was challenged in the chairs that we sat in were difficult for her to sit in. And that when she was leaning over on the desk, that she wasn't lazy kid that didn't want to do her work. Actually her body was giving out because these chairs were difficult and her body was weak. And we established this unbelievable relationship. She started producing work. She just blossomed and developed, and she ended up running for president of the school.
I look for the teachable moments. They're always there. And so, again, if you're not pressing your agenda, you have a lesson plan, you need to have a lesson plan, a daily plan of where you're going, but that needs to be flexible.
When a student's needs are different than the most of the kids in the class or all of the kids in the class, I go to that student and I set up that project for them to do in class. And that's what they need to do. Like, for instance, this young man, we were doing a storyboard of the story he was telling me. So a storyboard takes, you know, it's sequencing, it's comprehension, and it's something that he was engaged in, pictures, got pictures off the internet. We're gonna do a storyboard. I set up the project, or whatever it is, I set it up and I let the student participate in it. And then sometimes I invite the other kids if they want to do it too. Does anybody else want to do this? And if they do, I'm just flexible. You know, the learning is happening.
The purely cognitive processes are also prone to be delayed because of processing problems. Children with motor planning or visual spatial, or particularly severe low muscle tone or muscle asymmetry or motor asymmetries, are going to have a hard time with the perceptual motor tasks that are tied to many cognitive assessments, but may be able to do many things in the emotional and social thinking realm or reasoning realm that show that they're really cooking. They're really smart kids.
When I come into the classroom, the classroom is a haven for me. So whatever's happening in my life outside, and there has been days of turmoil, once I get here, it's about me being of service to the students and me helping them. I would say to teachers, when you come in, your body language, your nonverbal communication, your sarcasm, all of those things are powerful.
The topic of including kids who have a label or diagnosis of autism is a very complex topic. We believe it has to be looked at in a very individualized way. That some children benefit greatly from inclusion, but we have to look at issues such as the type of the classroom, the skills of the regular educator in the classroom, and whether there are the proper supports in place.
When I was in class, if a teacher didn't understand me, they would sort of pick on me, and the other kids would pick up on that, and so the whole class would pick on me. So I tended to get bullied a lot just because, you know, even because of the teachers.
How was school in 4th grade? And she said it was horrible. And the teacher marked all my things wrong, and she always put me in the group with the kids that were not smart. and she never mixed us up. Now, if there's ever a, red flag for mixing up kids in groups, that was a commercial.
The emphasis is that autism is a different way of being rather than a disordered way of being. And what that means is that our relationships just may be different from what most people expect.
Finding other human beings pleasurable and rewarding and forming that ability to have that relationship. Now, why is that so important for thinking? Well, think what the focus on and the pleasure in the relationship with somebody other than yourself brings. If you don't have that intimacy, that pleasure in relating to someone else, what's the alternative? What do? You self-absorb.
High school was a very hard time for me because when I tried to figure out what someone else was thinking, I couldn't because I didn't have the skills to read body language. I couldn't do eye contact that well. So it was a very hard thing for me to be in a situation where I really had not as much information as everyone else.
My intention is a partnership with the students for them to learn not only life skills and academics that are going to help them in life. And I really try to tie everything into living in the world, living with others.
When I was teaching in a public school in Northern California, I had a student that came into my third grade classroom that was identified as on the spectrum. He had limited verbal ability and serious behaviors. In order to prepare my class for Alex, because I knew the climate in the school was, nobody really wanted Alex in their classroom because he would tear things up, he'd run around and disturb their class. But I wanted them to see Alex as someone very special and that we were chosen because our class had good social skills and that we had compassion for others and that we had so much that we could offer to Alex.
You know what happens to students who are different? In grade school, there was a lot of bullying and a lot of teasing. I did not know how to interact with my classmates in a way that they could understand or appreciate.
Kids weren't very